everybody. Thanks very much for spending the time with us for the next half an hour. I'm James. I'm the CEO and founder of a brand and digital studio. We have offices globally in London, Berlin, Los Angeles, New York, and Sydney. The purpose of the session today is hear from these super talented founders for them to tell us more from how we build great brands. So I'm going to start off by asking you both to introduce yourself. Maybe we could start with you, Patrick.
Super. So hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. I'm Patrick. I'm co-founder and CEO of Neoplants. What we do is we're a synthetic biology company building plants to purify the air, starting with indoor air pollution. So right now we're selling bioengineered house plants that clean the air from chemical compounds you have in your homes.
You, Christian?
Good. Hi, I'm Christian. I'm the founder of Ecosia, which is a search engine that uses 100% of its profits to fund climate projects, especially tree planting projects. We've planted 215 million trees so far, and we are Europe's biggest search engine with a market share of less than 1%. But still, yeah, giving our best. Yeah.
I wonder, as you're talking, Christian, if we can start with you to kind of talk about your journey to how you kind of positioned Ecosia. You know, obviously climate tech space is incredibly crowded and cut through is quite hard to achieve. So I wonder if you can kind of give us a bit of an overview of that.
Yeah. So I think my personal story was that initially I wanted to, when I grew up, I wanted to be rich, I wanted to become a millionaire, like all those things that people planted into my head. But then while I was kind of trying to get there, studying business administration, I realized, is this really what I want to do? And then I started traveling for a while and figured out that no, actually not. I rather want to make sure that first I learned about the climate crisis and I thought, this is important. We're facing extinction. Nobody told me. Why not? And then also I just met so many people, especially in developing countries, who were not as privileged as I. And I felt like, okay, with all those privileges, I have the obligation to also give back. So this was basically my motivation. And then I thought, okay, what can I do? I had a small website back then when I thought, okay, this website is mildly successful, but most importantly, we're giving 50% of our revenue to Google. Google seems to have a really good business model. Maybe I can copy that. So this is the idea, how the idea was created, basically using a very, very successful business model to solve a problem that is really, really important to me. And if I had known, so that was 16 years ago, I think, if I had known how complicated that would be to build a search engine and scale a search engine, I might have reconsidered, but fortunately I didn't know back then. So that was a little bit the story. And I think the really interesting part when it comes to us as a company is that we're very much in the nature-based space, where we try to fund tree planting projects in very remote locations and work with sometimes people from very, very different backgrounds. But then we also try compete in tech, and basically we're competing against all the big tech companies. Two very, very different worlds, and also partially involved in climate tech, so very, very different worlds, which I think really helped me get hopefully a rather complete picture of the problem and also the solution space that we're operating in.
And if I could ask you the same question, Patrick?
So about the story behind.
Yeah, story, kind of, I guess, and how you stand out in what's a difficult space and market.
Yeah, so we're kind of unique in the type of company that we're building because we're the only company building these kind of products. So
I imagine that's a blessing and a curse, right?
It's actually both, yeah. So it's very easy to differentiate ourselves because we're building like a natural air purifier for people's homes, so that's relatively simple. But to pave the way in many ways, both technically in terms of R&D, but also in terms of go-to-market, explaining to investors what we're doing, the type of product we're building, it's a bit challenging. But it allows us to innovate not only in R&D, but also in how to go to market. So that's interesting.
It's an interesting point you bring up there. I think a lot of startups don't necessarily struggle, but have to kind of really work on the context switching from the investor story to the kind of customer story and back, and sometimes you can see them get a bit muddled up on that. Is that something you found early on for yourself?
So the interesting story behind this. So we're on the market for like 6 months now, selling to consumers. So it's a direct-to-consumer company via our website. And our website at first was very much, since we've been building this product for 5 years, we've always pitched the company as if we're pitching to investors. So when we first got to market, we kind of built the website, obviously to sell a product, but with the technical words for investors or the way to present ourselves as a company. And very quickly we understood that it's not about us, it's about the customers. It's about not even our value proposition, but what it can do for the customers. So we changed the way we approach things, we changed the way we talked about us. We don't really talk about us, we talk about first the customers and then the product, and not at all about the company.
And then the result of the product and what it does for you as well?
Yeah, definitely. That's, but it's more about what it does for you, and then what it is, and then how we built it and who we are as a company, etc. Because if you start pitching the company first, you'll check a lot of like early tech adopters, for example. We have a bunch of people that bought our plants that are interested in the mission, the technology, etc. But you won't be able to scale with just this. You'll have a few key people, evangelists, that's really good to start with. But then it's really about the benefit of the product and mostly being consumer-centric, really being, okay, what it does for you or for your kid or for your parents or for your home in general. Yeah.
So if we think about kind of difference between brand and marketing a bit there, like how do people turn up at Ecosia? Obviously, you've recently done a campaign that's kind of, you know, had a reasonable amount of media spend on it. Can you maybe talk about the tension between the product marketing, so, you know, a search engine, hopefully we all know what a search engine is, but then the kind of benefit of the search engine and how you kind of address those things at Ecosia?
Yeah, I think that the challenge for us is that we don't really have a product that you would really need in that sense. I think most of you are probably using a well-known competitor or have been using that if you haven't switched over yet. So there's not a deep desire. I think the deep desire that people have is, well, our planet isn't going well and I want to do something about it. So most of our messaging is actually about that. And by the way, we have a search engine. So that's a little bit... of course, people still need to use our product every day. Otherwise, we're not generating the funds that are needed to fund all those climate projects.
And do people worry that the search engine isn't good as the unnamed competitor we're talking about right now?
Yes, I think that's the main concern, and that's the first thing that people are checking and that we also need to convince. By the way, if you want to give it a try, you can download it now. Talking about marketing and how we're acquiring users.
Always be selling.
Yes. So yeah, this is of course the main thing, and also a big disbalance, right? We're competing against companies with 10,000 times the resources. It's not even David against Goliath. It's a small ant fighting against Goliath in that sense. But I think the main challenge is really to get people's attention, ask them to give it a try, and then many people stick around and keep using the product.
Awesome. You're obviously at the beginning of your journey, but when you kind of think about it in the bigger space, do you think that you can create brands that people love and like really wholly kind of own themselves in the climate tech space?
Absolutely. But I might be different from others. I don't think it comes from marketing. I really believe it comes from product, especially if you're trying to have an impact. Focus on building the best product ever, and then how to convey the benefits of the product to the people. It's going to be trivial if the product is fantastic. That's my deep belief. If the product is very different, unique, then marketing would kind of follow from that.
I guess from my position, when I look at your product, obviously there's beautiful form, there's a plant which has got like natural cues and stuff. You know, it's a nice thing to have in your home or your work environment. And so therefore I think that obviously makes it very attractive. I guess where it will be tested is when competitors come into the market, which I'm sure they will, and then it becomes around the differentiation, right? And like why the original is better than the competitor or whatever else.
Yeah. So it took us 5 years to build this product. So I suspect that
you've got a good moat then, you hope.
We'll see the competitors coming, but we like to keep everybody like in the team on their feet. So we don't try to have defensibility by having IP or patents. Like we do have those because investors like to see those. But it's really about keeping the innovation rolling, iterating quickly, learning from the customer insights, building with our R&D team, and just keep innovating according to what people want. So that's, I think, the key to differentiation. Just be the best and be constantly better, not than the competition, but than you were a year ago. So, but it would have been great if we had the competitors to start with, because it would
natural bit of competition to help you move along,
it would put a bit of fire, you know.
Yeah.
And for now, since we're the only one really doing this type of thing, I think it's we're fighting against complacency most of the time. Yeah.
When we think about the benefit of Ecosia, I guess one of the things, obviously, amazing numbers when you look at the number of trees planted. It's at this point that I put my hand up and admit that we worked on the Ecosia brand, so I'm kind of talking my own book up a bit here. But obviously that's an amazing number, but I imagine that's the kind of thing that after a while people kind of ignore because they've heard it once, and then it kind of just becomes, and there's this well acknowledged fact that people struggle with really big numbers. We can't kind of like visualize them in our head. How as a brand do you kind of tell the story to offset that kind of like, I guess the dwindling returns of that amazing kind of achievement that you've made?
I think, yes, 215 million is a very impressive number, but once you heard it once or twice, you need something new. So what we try basically, while people are using the product, also keep telling that story and also keeps telling the story on our social media channels. There are tens of thousands of people who are involved in those projects and whose lives have been touched by what we're doing. And we can, if we just tell the story of a few of those, that basically also feeds the energy and, and reminds people why they should be using us instead of our competitors. So this is really important that we also make this very personal and emotional. I think it's like when we get comments on our social media channels, for example, it's people really express love. It's not that, oh, what you're doing is nice. It's, I love you. You're the best thing that exists on the planet. I follow everything you do. Like this, getting to this type of passion is only possible if you really tell more than an abstract story, but you need to get really into the details. And what we also tried to do, I think we never really disappointed our users. So there were, of course, sometimes our website goes down and things like that, but very rarely, don't be worried. But if you operate at that scale and you're not Google or Microsoft, it's just difficult to compete at that level. But in terms of integrity, what we're doing as a company, I couldn't point to a single event where I said where I would say, if our new users knew this, then we would really be in trouble. I think so one thing that we did, for example, we converted the company, which initially was a normal startup, we turned it, so I and my business partner, Tim, we gave away 99.9% of the shares to a foundation to make sure that the company can't be sold, no profits can be extracted, and the mission can't be changed. So, and this means that always 100% of the profits will go to climate action. And this for me really, with this as a fact, I can very, very authentically communicate that we are just the best product, the best search engine that you should use if you care about the climate crisis. And I think there were various situations like this where we're also very transparent with our numbers, where I feel like our users are very, very grateful because there are a lot of businesses that do shady things, and they're grateful that we are one of the lighthouses that are doing the opposite.
Mm-hmm. One of the tensions that we find in brands when I work, particularly with early stage startups, is that up until this moment in time, everything's been very short term. It's about getting things done, hitting the next goal. And brand's quite a long term thing in terms of you have to kind of build it slowly and over time. Obviously, you're quite near the beginning of your kind of journey on that front. How do you think about those short term requirements versus long term, the brand you want to build?
I think they go together. I think it's about a journey that you craft yourself, that you tell first to the team and then to the customers and to investors as well. So, for example, for us, the day-to-day, we have to operate at different speeds because our marketing, operations, product team is operating at a speed that's much faster than the R&D team. The R&D team doesn't care about this first product anymore. They care about the one that we're going to launch in January, the one we're going to launch in 2 years, and then the long-term kind of roadmap. So it's personally, it's a fun challenge for me because you need to think, okay, right now I have huge problems that I need to solve today or maximum tomorrow when it comes to go-to-market. But I also have to think, okay, what does that mean? Like the early success, what do they mean for our long-term journey? And important to say that we're kind of pushing the limits of plant synthetic biology with the goal, the guiding light of having an impact on greenhouse gases, not just VOCs, chemical compound in your home. So how can we increase the ability of plants to have a positive impact on the greenhouse gas composition of the atmosphere? And it will require deep R&D that is going to take something like 10, 15 years. Don't say that to investors. It's kind of bridging this first type of product, this first category of product is bridging the gap from what we need to do today to be a successful company and what we aim to be a planetary changing endeavor.
How about for you, Christian? If you think about short-term user numbers versus long-term kind of admiration for Ecosia, how does that tension work for you?
Yeah, I think you need to be doing both in the end. And it's an art to find the right balance. Sometimes also there is a need to focus more on the short term if, I don't know, your business is at risk or some crucial partnership needs to be closed, then you need to focus on this. But again, I think there's, especially if you think about brands, you should not do anything in the short term that really risks the long term. So that's what I said when I say integrity. We would never make compromises that really basically could harm the brand in a way that it's impossible to basically regain that trust from our users. So that's important.
Switching it up a bit, thinking about yourselves as kind of like, obviously, leaders within this. Obviously, Silicon Valley taught us this idea of the founder of hero, and we're seeing that across the world as like an established thing. How's your own personal identity kind of like sit in the company? Do you think about that? Do you kind of like respond to that? I think it's an interesting question that we get with a lot of the founders that we work with.
Yeah, so I come from a technical background. So I did my PhD, and right after my PhD, I started this company with my co-founders. So
new world for you a bit.
Yeah, completely. So for me, I started like extremely humble and like being really like kind of in the shadows, etc. But very quickly you understand that it's not good for the company, it's not good for your mission if you take a step back personally. You should have your ego completely aside and non-existent, but you as a personality need to be front and center because you're leading the charge, you're driving the mission, you're giving kind of the direction of the entire team. Even if it's not a one-person thing, there needs to be someone that spearheads and that gives, okay, this is the direction and we're going to push for that. So it's been, a journey for me in the past 5 years, and I've loved it every step of the way because it's really humbling to know that personally you can have this type of impact, that you can actually, if you do things right, have a positive impact on a planetary scale. That's very exciting. This is why I wake up every morning, and this is why the entire team wakes up every morning. This is how we've been able to assemble a great team, is showing the mission, showing the vision, and showing success on your trajectory, on the roadmap, and saying, well, we're getting there. We've had a huge milestone this month. We're going to have a better one next year. And if you continue like this in 10 years, we'll have a planetary impact. Same question for you. Like, how do you think about your own identity wrapped up in Ecosia?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if that's really necessary, but at least in our case, the connection between brand and founder story is very, very strong. I think this really makes a lot of things easier as well. It's hard to tell basically just the story of a brand without a face to it. I would say I do those things, like for example, participating here.
I was going to say what we're doing right now.
Being the face of the company. However, I have to say, like, this is also something that, because I'm naturally more an introvert person, it's also quite a lot of energy, and so it has consequences. That means that other things you can't be doing, or that you have to leave your comfort zone. If I could just decide for my own well-being, I would not be sitting on a stage and looking in front of sitting in front of hundreds of people. I think it's nice that this maybe pushes you a little bit out of your personal boundaries, but there are also some compromises that you may need to make for your life ultimately. But not complaining, it's totally worth it. I'm super happy with what we've achieved and how I'm also able to maybe reflect some of the personal choices that I have made. For example, giving away my company and not having focus on impact maximization and not profit maximization. That this translates into my company, but then I also see other founders or companies in really completely different spaces that say, wow, what you've done is really impressive. We want to do something similar. And that is then a big reward for, I would say, a rather small compromise that you have to make with your personal life.
Another kind of impact, great impact there. When people talk about brand, one of the first things that kind of comes to mind is visual impact. We want people to notice you. You guys have got a very slick website. It looks like it, had time and effort invested in it. How do you feel like reflecting back on that in terms of the visual aspect of trying to tell your story and really try and make sure when people see it, they remember it?
Visuals is very important for us since we're selling a physical product that's going to end up in people's homes, so people will identify with it because they're going to show it to their friends, families, etc. So video format is very important for us. But since we're targeting something that you can't see, it's like COVID, like you can't see the bad stuff that's in the air. It's very important to figuratively and literally overlay, okay, what does it do? How can I visualize the chemical compounds that it absorbs? So you can show like fantastic data from our team, etc. But people don't respond emotionally to charts and graphs and things like this.
Do you think it
Do you think it's ever too early to be responding to that visual stuff? I think, one thing I've found when I talk to a lot of early stage founders is they're like, oh, we'll get to it one day. But my advice, and I am talking my own book here a bit, is like, if you can explain something visually and capture people's attention, they're going to be engaged twice as much. So I don't think it's ever too early to focus on it.
I agree. At Neoplants, we were extremely in bunker mode, in almost stealth mode for 5 years before creating the first product, because we didn't know if it was possible to create it. So we didn't talk to anyone, didn't use really visuals, and once we created a product that we were happy with, then it was about communicating, because you don't want to overpromise, especially when you're building a new category of product. It's not only your company, your brand that's going to be impacted, but the entire field, and you want to be aware of this, and currently there's a lot of new plant synthetic biology companies that are popping off that I know that in some way or another we kind of inspired to do their own thing. So we're quite conscious about the impact that we can have. So we try to always under-promise, over-deliver. So I agree that it's going to attract a lot of eyes, have a lot of traction. But then if you can't deliver on the cool things that you put out there, then you have the backlash.
And obviously, lots of search engines are pretty minimal in terms of their design, and obviously we work together on the Ecosia website. Like, how much visual impact do you think, having reflecting on that process and thinking back now, do you think it's important that you guys have? Because obviously you've got to try and hit that kind of audience quite heavily there.
Yeah, I think our competitors, Google and Bing, they basically they want you to install and then just basically be in the background, right? For us, it's different. We want you to install, but then also want to give you those ideally daily reminders why are you using this product. So we need to be much more present and visual. So this was indeed important. I think it was also a little bit of a learning journey for me personally to find the right way. Back in the early days when we were basically I was almost like we were a one-person team. And we needed to just have some design because there needs to be something on the website, so you need to decide on something. And I basically sat next to a freelance designer and we were just moving around a few pixels and I said, okay, this looks okay, let's use this. This created also quite a bit of depth because the choice, for some reason, we decided almost like a cartoonish style and our logo was off and I don't know, a few things that normally you wouldn't do. And that then also needed to be cleaned up at some point. So I would agree that you should think about this early and not save too much money on this because it can really hit you. And we had people coming to us and saying, I thought it was a computer game. No, it's not. It's a search engine.
Yeah, I think a number of times I've seen a bad name or something hurt people and it's something they rush to because they needed to buy a URL or, it can be seen that. While we're talking about mistakes, are there any mistakes that you think of kind of from a brand point of view that kind of stick out that make you go like, oh, I wish we hadn't done that?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think it's about positioning ourselves as customer-centric instead of company-centric.
Right, okay.
So it took us
that messaging thing.
Yeah, a month or two to kind of adjust there. Another thing that we also kind of underappreciated is we're selling GMOs in people's homes. We're using genetic modification to allow to create these plants. And so it's very important that we communicate very early through all social medias about what we do. So what we're doing much more recently is literally taking a phone and filming the entire process of what's happening in the lab, putting faces behind the scientists, showing how we go from...
Making it real.
Yeah, building a DNA to testing the full product in real-size conditions in a 1-minute kind of video format. And I think this is something that we've underappreciated and didn't really do at first when we first launched, but we understood very quickly that people, first, it's too good to be true, or it's GMO, that you need to be super transparent. You want to be the anti-Monsanto, basically. You want to show that these technologies can be used for good, and there's real people with the only objective is to have a positive impact in people's environment, health, and the planet. So it's important to show this and to anticipate the negative feedback that you can have just by showing that you're human.
Yeah, I think facelessness is something I see again and again. People don't necessarily think about who's behind it, and as soon as you put a human face behind something, then that trust always leaps up. This is a funny question. It's a bit of a small thing, but I've seen a lot of people in the climate space really struggle with this, and I think we'll go over here because you've got it on your front. Can climate tech brands not be green? That's the thing that we have this kind of big philosophical question about it all the time.
I think it was your team who decided to.
Yeah, we did make it green.
Yeah, I like the color. But indeed, yeah, there's a lot of green logos. Yeah, but we have a lot of other colors. Actually, we're very colorful. This is the standard. Standard color.
You're green as well. Do you think you could not be green? Obviously, plants. It's complex.
It's quite easy to be green. Let's say it like this. So if you go on our website, you can see that it's a mix of green and blue kind of thing. So if we're talking about the color, when you're selling plants, it's difficult to have a pink or a red kind of visual identity. So it's just easier. It's soothing, I think. Green, blue, it's just soothing colors.
This is a kind of a bit of a spend question, but how much money do you think early stage startups should spend on performance marketing? And you can talk about it in whichever relative way. Because that's something that a lot of founders talk to me. It's like, how much should we spend here versus later? For you, obviously, you're trying to get a product out into people's homes. There's a supply chain aspect to that as well. Just interested to kind of hear your reflections on that.
So I actually don't know.
Great.
So right now we have a super limited marketing budget, just because we're trying to understand what works before we go to huge scales. So I would say as much as is needed to invest the money in a smart way. So testing a lot of audiences, a lot of messaging, etc. And then as much as is needed until you see that there's no return on investment anymore. So I'm not sure I have a very precise question on this.
Good.
Yeah, I would say the same. I mean, performance marketing is good to get your initial metrics right because you need some traffic. But then relying on it for growth, I think if you have really profitable, if you're certain that your performance marketing is profitable, yes, maybe. We also don't want to give a lot of our revenue that we're generating just to Google and Facebook. So I have a little bit of a moral issue there as well, where I feel like I'd rather spend this in other ways. I think, the holy grail is if maybe you get your metrics right, but then you get to a product market fit that really your users and customers recommend you. I think relying on paid marketing, I think this can only be a small element in the mix, but it shouldn't be the driver of your growth. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But we had phases where this was the early days of Facebook marketing, where I was still running our Facebook campaigns then, where we put in €1 into marketing, and 2 months later we made €10 in revenue. It's gotten much more expensive now, so don't be too optimistic about that. So if there's an opportunity, of course you should use it. Just make sure it's really profitable.
I can see down here time's wrapping up, so I'm going to move to kind of some useful takeaways. I wonder if we could start off with kind of maybe one piece of advice you give to the audience about kind of building a great brand.
Build a great product. I think that's it.
Do you think it's enough, or do you think it's brand and product working together?
I think it's 90% of the job. I don't think it's enough. I think you still need to have great marketing and great way to convey what the product does. But it's so much easier to first put your own energy into it and really have a convincing message when you know that the product is unique, powerful, the best thing that exists. It's just so much more comfortable to talk to customers, to future employees, current employees, anybody. It's just when you build a fantastic product, marketing just is much easier, 100 times easier. So I would maybe be contrarian here and say build a great product and then think about marketing.
Yes.
A bit different with search engines.
Yeah. So I would agree. On top of that, I think for me it's really important, what we're doing, that you're authentic and actually trustworthy. And then, also what we kind of had to learn the hard way was initially we thought we need to be very humble, but then at some point we did a few PR stunts which really generated millions of people suddenly finding out about us. You can do that as a company. You don't have to be shy. And also if it's about PR stunts or even climate activism, it's not only the Greenpeace of this planet that can do that. A company can do it. A startup can do it. And if it works well, it generates a lot of free awareness that type of brand recognition you can't buy, I think.
And if I can bounce back on that, I think it's super important nowadays to be authentic and to have fun while doing your marketing. It's if you're authentic, if you're really having fun shooting, for example, fun videos in the lab or putting your product in a funny way, that's what people respond to. Paid marketing right now, at least at D2C companies, doesn't work very, very well. But if you create something that's viral, that you would share to your parents, for example, that's something that just works.
Yeah, my final note there is be careful with funny. Be fun, but don't be funny. Funny is really hard.
Not
Awesome.
ridiculous.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.